my presentation where I showed that there are investor agitations, I mean, for now, from the developed, environment regarding where their investments will go. And in fact, some of them are saying, look, we're going to be bringing sanctions to bear on managers of investments, especially directors, and they can actually call out their money by divestment, and then or even do some bigger stuff. So I don't know how that is developing, but let's hear a little bit his intervention. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Innocent Azi. My name is Olutobi Onojin. I work at the Nigerian Stock Exchange. I lead the corporate sustainability and responsibility team. That involves supporting over 150 companies, listed companies, and over 200 plus investor relations, broker-dealer companies to deepen the concept or the adoption of corporate sustainability across board. I've been in this space for 8 years, thereabout, advancing sustainability disclosures and working with companies to improve their sustainability practice. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you clearly. I had a technical challenge. I'm happy to be back. So just to confirm that everyone can see my screen and hear me well.
Yes, I can see.
I would confirm if you can see my screen and hear me clearly.
Yeah, please.
Yes, we can.
Can you put it in
Full
slide
screen
mode?
Yeah, slide mode.
Can just to confirm that you can see my screen and you can hear me clearly?
You can see your screen.
Yeah, we can.
Okay. Great. So I did a bit of like a background. A lot has been said. Let me start by saying that. I was going to talk about, I came here to talk about change, financial sector emissions management.
If you can actually
contribute my quota, how the financial sector climate change and emissions management. In my best interest of time to not.
If you can expedite your presentation, we have less than 20 minutes to round up. He's having a challenge of, okay, while he's trying to fix that, if there's anyone with questions, and then those who have answers to my questions, that'll be fine. I'll start with Shari. Shari, are you there?
Yes.
Shari, what will you tell? You have heard our story from this part of the world regarding the financial sector and the struggle to mainstream low carbon practices in their. Okay, Toby, you are back. Toby, we're just saying that we have less than 20 minutes to round up. If you can do this in just maybe 5 minutes so that we can take questions, and you can as well address any of the issues that came up. That'll be fine. Unmute.
Thank you. From the capital market perspective, of course, investments are a critical aspect of the climate change management, global climate change management strategy. So Dr. Mahmood had talked about the green bonds, for example, which are a tool that has been deployed globally to reduce climate change emissions across board. But I mean, she mentioned that the green bond management program was started in 2018. I would like to just add that it was actually started a little earlier than that. Perhaps I think if I just around 2015, 2016 by the Nigerian Stock Exchange in collaboration with the Ministry of Environment. And that collaboration led to the issuance of the very first inaugural green bond on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, and um, two private sector organizations have issued green bonds. That's Access Bank, like Dr. Mahmood mentioned, and another organization called North South Power Company, which issued a green infrastructure bond. And to also say that the federal government has issued the series two of the sovereign green bond. But the challenge though is when we talk about um, I mean climate change emissions and management across the financial sector, when you look at the capital market perspective, the most important thing from my understanding is the disclosure of climate related data by issuers, and because that feeds into the investment decision process by the investors. So there is a pull from one end by investors asking companies to disclose more about on their performance on climate change. On the other hand, there's a push from the issuers, that's the companies, to disclose more on on their greenhouse gas emissions. Um, and there's so much has been said. Dr. Mahmood talked a lot about a lot of activities that banks are implementing. Dr. Jari talked about some policies, but one particular, Dr. Ali Jari Adejumo talked about policies, but one particular thing that he said resounded very much to me. He mentioned that, of course, the financial development of the financial sector can lead to reduction in emissions of greenhouse gas emissions. Yes. Um, but what can the government do and to facilitate this? He also mentioned that the private sector has been mandated because they've been recognized that they are just as equally important as the government sector in reducing climate change and greenhouse gas emissions. But how can the private sector um, adapt cleaner production processes, just like Dr. Ali Jari mentioned? There's so much work that needs to be done from my perspective. When we look at, I mean, Dr. Ali Jari talked about MRV. MRV is measurement, reporting, and verification of greenhouse gas emissions. Ultimately, your MRV process would fit into your NDCs, which is your nationally determined contributions, and there's so much going on in that space across board. It's important to think of um, the role of issuers when you think about the disclosure of climate related or climate related information or data from companies from at the organizational and the facility level, as it feeds into this nationally determined contributions. It's in the private sector, there's so much going on in terms of disclosure frameworks. So you would have you have the Global Reporting Initiative, yes, which is the most recognized and the most adopted framework for disclosure of sustainability reports. You have the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board. Shari had talked about the Task Force for Climate Related financial disclosures. There's so much going on, and it's a challenge from the issuer's perspective of what companies and what frameworks companies can adopt. So I have taken this slide from the greenhouse gas emissions, greenhouse gas protocol standard, the corporate standard, that literally talks about what a company should disclose. And of course, investors are looking for this kind of data from companies that they would want to invest in, as it relates to this kind of data in relating to climate change related data. So of course, investors want the data to be very relevant to their company's performance, to be as complete, and they want consistency in the publications of this data. They want transparency and they want accuracy. Ultimately, these would feed into national systems of course, the national NDC data systems. But then there's a challenge, in my opinion. This is a challenge for us in Nigeria. So I'll read this off the screen. The trend is that source level data from facilities, that's from companies, that of course that the financial sector would contribute to, would give loans to, would invest in. Data from those facilities can be used to improve the national level emissions and provide reference for validating national numbers. But the challenge here is this: there has to be consistency in the frameworks that we've adopted. So I've mentioned SASB, for example, I've mentioned GRI, I've mentioned TCFD, and all these frameworks across board. That challenge exists. Another challenge is, and this is typical to us in Nigeria, national inventory systems are typically placed before facility or corporate inventories, so that companies can build their facilities around or their inventories around what the national standards are. But in our case, these are still being built. And so Dr. Adejare had mentioned that we had a national climate policy, and then this is being revised. I understand that there's ongoing work to build functional national inventories as well. And so this is a challenge across board that investors would be concerned about when they're looking for climate related data for performance of companies. And also on the push end, how do companies then disclose on these, on their climate related performance data when the national frameworks are still underdeveloped or still being developed. But the good news is, to the first challenge, there is progress in terms of the alignment of the different frameworks. So I had talked about the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, and then all of these frameworks, the TCFD, they're coming together to align, to help companies have a standard, or at least some sort of a standard framework that they can publish their sustainability, their greenhouse gas related data. I'd like to let me just skip these slides in the interest of time and go right to, okay, actually, let me take that slide. I had mentioned the Global Reporting Initiative, and this is already what companies are reporting on. The GRI is the most dominant global standard for sustainability reporting. And even in Nigeria, at the Nigerian Stock Exchange, we've had an extensive partnership with them to promote greenhouse gas sustainability reporting amongst listed companies. This slide just talks about what companies are already reporting on, the different scopes, and how the investors will be looking at this. So it's a framework for how companies already publish their greenhouse gas emissions. But then again, insights from a report that was published by, if I'm correct, and the most recent one, talked about the task force for climate-related financial disclosures, and indicated that, as Shari had mentioned, and this is just to align with Shari, that the adoption has grown very fast over the past few years. 1 in 5 companies already report climate risk in line with the TCFD recommendations. So it's important for us to know that that trend is on the rise. And it's what do investors want? That's the question that we need to always consider when we think about financial sector management and climate related and climate change emissions or greenhouse gas related emissions. What do investors want? So the concept of double materiality is not new, but it's becoming more relevant. Financial materiality, investors want to know how material climate change is to your your ability to, how climate change affects your financial performance as a company. Is it going to affect your ability to raise finance? Is it going to affect your challenges like that? And on the other hand, investors want to know what the environmental and social materiality is. What is the impact of your organization's operations on the environment? Are you having a positive impact? And this aligns with what Dr. Mahmood had said, that the banking sector is very proactive. She mentioned Union Bank, proactively, transitioning away from diesel-powered systems into solar power. But the challenge still remains is how do we gather all of that data? And those frameworks we've presented. In the capital market system, Shari had talked about Makani and some initiatives that he had proposed when he was the governor of the Bank of England. And so now that he's no more the governor of the Bank of England, he's working with the Sustainable Stock Exchanges Initiative to create a model guidance for how stock exchanges all over the world will guide their listed companies to publish climate-related information in line with the TCFD. This is an active project with the Nigerian Stock Exchange is part of, and it's with this over time, more guidance will come on how companies can adopt and can promote financial disclosures going forward. This would be my final slide. And this slide is, I'm literally asking with this slide, and it's a question for every one of us. What is the future of climate-related disclosures or climate-related financial reporting in the financial sector? In 2016, the FTSE, a study was done by the Climate Disclosure Standards Board, collaboration with FTSE. They surveyed 350 companies and using just literally asking, comply or explain, what are the trends in your financial, what are you publishing in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, and explain why you are not. Are we there yet? I think it was Dr. Jare or Dr. Adejunwa that had mentioned that it's important to have critical, that hopefully we will get to some point where we can have compulsory or compulsory disclosures of financial of climate related disclosures, and I totally support that. But work has to go into that that to make that happen. Another statement that strikes me very much is a statement by economists that was published on the Wall Street Journal on January 16, 2019. The first statement struck me. It says, a carbon tax is the most cost-effective lever to reduce carbon emissions at the speed and pace with which is necessary. How then can we get there? I believe In the financial sector, it's extremely important to raise awareness and promote disclosures more, and that's when we will get to the levels that we need to get in terms of this climate related disclosures. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Olutobi. That's really rich, and good to know that some things are happening among Nigerian investors, especially with respect to increasing knowledge, increasing awareness, because global investors are already responding within those who are in the global play. And of course, the essence of this webinar is to bring it closer home and ensure that people like your organization begin to do more from enlightenment to action. Thank you very much. We appreciate. We do not really have more time, but we'll have some questions. I started with Shari, and I said, what will you be telling? Shari, are you there? What will you be? Yes. Very good. Good to see you again. What will you now be telling financial operators, the banks, the venture capitalists, the mutual funds operators, and all those who might be seeking local or international, finance or funding to do now to enable them transitioning